Walkthrough for Marius on Bartok, Allegro, Barbaro. Really excited about this. Very cool piece of music. I've only taught it a couple of times. I've played it. I've actually only taught it once. Played it a long time ago. And it's so fun to kind of get back into it. It's really, really energetic, exciting piece of music. Yeah, super fun to play. Very percussive, as Bartok often is, and he writes his music a little bit differently. If you're looking at the score, you'll notice that it's not a lot of long slurs, and even two-note slurs. He doesn't really notate that way. He'll opt for like a tenuto followed by a staccato note in the way he articulates things. So it's a little bit different to look at in terms of how he notates things, and that's his style. We're gonna get started with this. So a little bit of a walkthrough, and I'm not gonna perform this thing flawlessly from the beginning to end or anything like that, but I'm just gonna kind of give you an idea of what to expect as we go through it, and as you work through it, rather. So this piece has got basically three parts to it. It's kind of like this ABA form, with the A at the end being slightly, modified. If you're thinking about keys in this, it's a little more challenging, and you're dealing with 20th century music. So the idea of key isn't really so much in the sense of major and minor. But oftentimes, there'll be moments where things do have this tonal center. In this case is certainly the case in this piece. So the way this piece is kind of structured in terms of key is, think of more of a tonal center rather than like completely adhering to major or minor tonalities. So at the beginning of this, in the A section, we're dealing with F sharp minor. So there's your your F sharp minor chord, right? And so that's a tonal center for sure there, and it ends as well on the third section at that same chord. In the middle section, we get to kind of this F major, and I don't want to say F major. We get an F tonal center, and we do have an F triad. And as you can see, not your standard F major, certainly not. And then it gets much more chromatic as we go forward. So that's just kind of like just some very basics with the theory and sort of the structure of the piece. Okay, so let's dig in how to get going with it. And so I just have these loose sheets of paper up here. So what I got to work with for now, which is, 9 sheets. So yeah, there'll be that little awkward moment where I tear the pages off the piano because I didn't load up my iPad for this. It's a little easier to read if I don't know the piece super well, if I'm not reading off the iPad, because right now I got a 9-inch screen on that thing. So I'm not going to do that. So here we go. At the beginning, got a lot of notes. That's all meant to be played both hands, obviously. So oftentimes, things are notated in clefs, like it looks like it's all the left hand, right part, but oftentimes the right hand's taking it. Okay, just look at stem directions, and oftentimes things can make a little bit more sense that way. So we start both hands down here, and that's meant to give us sort of this boost, like this power and sound at the beginning. Loud, right? And I'm clipping a little bit. How about I turn that down? Still clipping. Sorry. Gonna have to play a little bit lighter. And then that's gonna carry through as you do. Notice the sforzando followed by the mezzo forte. Okay, so that's the idea. Now here, I think it's really useful to start practicing hands alone. So we'll go through that a little bit. So, in this passage, we have the melody and the octaves. Pretty straightforward stuff. The way I would do this when all said and done, when you do have it hands together, is to kind of think of it in two-note phrases like this. It's not going to be that pronounced when all said and done, but kind of don't get in the habit of being too behaved like this. So this is not good. It's too still. So I want to kind of throw at those, toss your hands at them. And these, you can just kind of grab, just kind of grab those middle notes there. They're not meant to be heavy at all. So you can kind of bounce your wrist at them too, or your forearm at them. It's little tiny pushes, you know. But I think it's a little bit easier to kind of pull the fingers back to keep it a little bit lighter, a little less larger muscle groups getting involved there. So I'll go through that again, kind of slow motion, without any pedal right now. It's gonna be pedaled, but I'm gonna take that out so you can hear the kind of the two-note phrase aspect of this. Got that wrong, hold on. It's a little hard to read here, right? So we'll talk about that. We got C double sharp, B sharp, B. Bartok. Well, I find it almost, you know, once you get past the reading of it, it's a little bit easier to kind of look at the piano, look at the shapes that are being made here, to have a better idea of what's actually happening. So, you know, if you look at just the melodic idea from the beginning, right, which is... It kind of actually sounds like almost like that. That's nearly the new tonic in a way, right? The way that falls to that E. But the thing is you know, it's this pentatonic idea that's happening here. So we have this third, this minor third, followed by whole tone, and then a half step. So stepwise motion and then a minor third. So it's this pentatonic idea. And Bartok loved these modes, like pentatonic modes, sort of hybrid modes, you know, and then of course like Dorians and Phrygians and things. And that's really what set him apart from a lot of other composers at the time. He was really ahead of his time in many ways. So anyway, back to this. So you see at the beginning, E, A, da, and then we have this sort of variation on that. Okay. Now he's going to state this again, this time on our E. Down a second, and then we're going to go up a minor third. It's just a transposition. Right? And then we're going to step down. And then we're right back to where we were, so. And then we're doing that other pentatonic thing that we had. So we have to kind of have two of these, right? So we have this one, and with this one. And so you can tell right at the beginning, there's just basically two keys that he's working with not keys, but 2 harmonies that he's working with in each particular passage, okay? So, and then we're right back to where we were. And then we start to introduce this other idea kind of based on an earlier piece of this, right? Rather than just settling, we're going to get... And that's pretty much it. And he does it again an octave higher. That's it. There's your whole A section. It's very, very simple melodies. Barbaric, right? It sort of harkens back to this very, very old sound. Okay. And just in case you didn't know, Bartok was one of the earliest musicologists. He and Kodály, which were perhaps more Kodály was looked at as an ethnomusicologist, sorry, even more so than Bartok. But what Bartok did was go around to Kodály especially, but revisiting these Eastern European areas and reviving their folk music, or rather writing it down, and then writing their own music based on these folk tunes that would have probably otherwise been lost. Kodály was actually going around. They knew each other. They worked together in many ways, and he went around and actually recorded on wax cylinders these dying folk tunes in these smaller villages and things. And so Bartok was really inspired by this as well. And he wrote a lot of his music based on these things he would pull out of these Transylvanian folk tunes, for instance, right? Other Eastern European folk songs. So you can kind of hear that in this music. It has this very, very rustic sort of old world sound to them, pagan oftentimes, it kind of evokes that imagery. All right, back to this. So here we go. Where were we? So just going through those 2 different keys, right? 2 different sections of this A section, 2 different pentatonic scales of this A section. And I'm going to use pedal when all's said and done. So, and then I can really utilize that drop. And that's going to help me bring out those notes. I don't even have to try. It's just... Okay. Here. All right, so we get into this section, pasante. So if the other part was more pedaled, right, where you get these, pedaled twice a measure with the harmony changes of that left hand. Change. Oops. So, okay, so first of all, I'm talking about a little pianistic idea here. So I'm going to back up and talk about the pedal and the pasante section a little bit in a second. So we're entering in this passage here where I'm going to have, this encroaching hand positions, and it's going to be difficult to maintain accuracy if I don't maneuver my hands in a way to get out of the way of one another. So I need to raise my left hand more. So here's fine. I got notice my left hand, wrist is dropped, and then right away start to play more here and get the hell out of the way for those, so I don't you know, run into my right hand. So check that out. I'm going to do that slow motion here. Okay, so that seems clear, right? So don't stay in that area so you can get out of the way of the right hand as it's going through that familiar passage. Another aspect regarding the octaves that I was just doing there is you probably noticed that I'm using the fifth finger every single time. And I'm doing that because 1, it's all white keys, 2, it's all detached, and 3, it's detached in a way where I want a percussive sound. And moving from 5 to 4 is great for legato and a certain elegance that a barbaric piece of music like this is not going to ask for. So therefore, I'm going to go with 5s over and over again. That is not the case with black keys, however, which I'm going to come up to in a second, and I'll show you that. But I'm going to use the black keys, or I'm going to use the fourth finger on those black keys, okay? So for now, fifth finger all the way, okay? That's that statement. Notice 2, 4, 6, 8. It's an 8-measure 8-measure passage, right? So, which is very regular. Sounds very regular, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Has a different ending to it. This one goes up. This one is going to do the same thing, but it's going to go down. Very, very simple idea. We're going to do the same thing basically an octave higher. Hold on, let me do that again. Okay, so in the pasante section, like I was mentioning earlier, pasante means peasant-like, heavy-footed, is where that comes from. But basically, I would just want it to be kind of notey, right, and kind of thumpy. And therefore, I don't want it to kind of cover it up with lots of pedal to sort of glaze over that sort of notiness. So coming out of that passage right before the pasante, pedal, not a lot, but touches the pedal everywhere, so it's not pasante, right? But and then pasante. So basically drier, right? But also kind of heavy. Diminuendo. I'm going to hit that first one kind of loud like I did at the beginning of the piece, and then kind of let it kind of cloud over that diminuendo. It's a long one, so you can to really take your time, but the beginning of that, right after the forte, you know, don't keep playing because I think it's just too much. So I kind of back it way down to mezzo piano or something, or mezzo forte, and then do a very slow diminuendo down to piano before the next passage. And then here, again, we're going to be working with a very small group of notes. So we have this sort of modal idea. It's a scale passage, right? But it's not really anything based in major and minor, right? But it still has a tonal center of F sharp. F sharp minor would have a C sharp, right? And then something, oh, okay, that sounds much more minor, but what gives it that really unique quality is that flattened fifth. It's kind of Locrian-like in here, which is a mode starting on B. It's like Locrian with a raised second. See how I'm already modifying it? It's like, well, it's like this, but it's like that with this change. And Bartok loved doing stuff like that, hybrid modes. And that's, again, how he nestled his way into his own voice, really. That's one of the ways. Was by abandoning traditional major and minors and sort of creating his own organization of half steps and whole steps to create, new modes, some of which came from these folk songs and areas in Eastern Europe. Not all of them, but some of them. Okay, so here we go. There's my fingering for that, so seems good enough. An interesting thing, it's like it shows the left hand going from here and a dotted line going up to here, which is the same thing. So what did he mean by that? Well, mine says something in Russian at the bottom. But really what we want to do is create a somewhat of a dryness on the first one, kind of a breath mark, and then a sustain on the second one. So just imagine that instead of that confusing marking there, that you actually have an eighth note followed by an eighth rest. So let me show you how that's going to sound there. Leave it down. Okay. And then... Okay, now let's check out our mode here. Ooh, okay, we've expanded it. Now that's our scale. It's cool. All right. Anyway, so it's good to understand that, okay, that's what I'm dealing with in terms of my my mode there. So it's good to know your boundaries of this. Okay, here we go. I think what I would do is change the left hand fingering from 2-4 after a while, and don't do 2-4 and then jump. You might as well switch it in there so you're closer to that chord. That's what I would do. 4-2, and then the next ones do 1-2. You have a choice on that F sharp chord to either bring your thumb over or just play it with 5-4-2. It's up to you. You get more power obviously using the thumb, so I use 5-3-2. Yeah. And then we're gonna go down to 1 second. All right. So here we go. That's easy enough, right? But notice I'm using my fourth finger on those black keys, so 4, or actually 5 there, I think. Yeah, 5 here because I'm going to use my 4 on the F sharp. You see, I just want to kind of change it up, and then. Where else? Let's see. It's the same thing. Okay, so coming up here, 5-4, and you notice he has a slur mark from the G to the F sharp. So I'm definitely gonna use my 4. I'll play the F sharp lighter. So C major to D major, very familiar chords. So 5-4, 5-4-4, 5-4, 5-5. So use 4 and 5 on those, okay? But it's 4 the first time, 4 again here, but now go to 5 because you are in 4. Okay, so we're gonna go. Again, separate that and then sustain for the rest of it. All right, moving on. Almost to the end of the A section. Fingering here, do it again, and then switch. Put you in better position for the D chord. And fades away. Okay, now we enter the B section that starts in F, kind of this F major triad. So you notice that it is a B section, but it's the same tune, right? It's just treated so differently. So so we can call it a B section. There's one adjustment I make in this piece, and that is right here. I'm going to bring my left hand. So instead of the right hand doing this like it's written, I find it clumsy. In the left hand, it's easy enough to do that and come back. So I'm just going to do that. Two measures before that. Rather than, I just find that really awkward. You do what you want, but do what suits you best, but try that because I think it's better. Now in a new key, B flat major. One second. Okay, now we start to do this really chromatic passage as sort of this bridge into the next part. The way I'm looking at this is using your keys. Look at it like a whole tone step up. So B flat minor, C minor, D minor, E minor, and then back to, well, this is like F major, so there's a change there. Okay, and that's the moment where it stops. So B flat minor, C minor, D minor, E minor, and this change. Okay, so here we go. Right hand actually agrees with that by doing this B flat minor. Okay. So C here. And C major at the beginning of that. The augmented chords end this thing every time too, right? So there is some patterns here. So here's the end of this passage. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so land there and heavily here. 2 there, 3 there. Your other option is 4, 2. It just depends on how much you want to ulnar deviate versus keeping the wrist straighter. Either way's fine. I think I would choose that 5-3. But seriously, you might like the other way. Just to keep this kind of in that area. Sometimes that's easier to maintain one finger kind of above a note rather than. Anyway, test it out. Whoops. Okay, so we're nearing the end of this passage here, so I'm just going to kind of move forward. This is not too difficult, but here we go. Dolce, sweeter, finally. So it's like your left hand has a response there. So it seems like, what the hell's happening here, right? Like, what is that? But you see, it's... Oh, sorry. And then your left hand has a statement. It's a response or a finish to what your right hand did. It's very easy to miss that, but it's related to that idea. So ya-da-dee, and then the left hand, C, A. It's very cool. Okay, so you got this this part coming up where we have to hold notes, so we need this held. So the first one's listed as staccato, but it's not because it's actually being held by the other voice. So really it's going to look like this at the beginning, and then G is staccato, and then F sharp. So there's my fingering. Left with the diminished chord, and then okay, thumb goes on the first note of the two-note phrase, and you're gonna cross with the two, and here's why. Because the next part you'll see you gotta play that G with the thumb. So let's practice that. Just kind of roll over on it. This sort of motion. 5/4, 5/4, 5/3 on those three different chords. All the left hand here, because of what comes up right after it. See, you got it. That's got to be your right hand there, and you can't play the right hand with the C, which kind of looks like it is. But just play it all in the left hand. It's just got to sound like two different voices, very distinctly separated. Thumb again. This again is transposition. Thumb again. It's like a roll. Very delicate though. And then follow the articulation. And molto ritardando, so. Now we're back to familiar territory. Okay, so. Bam. Okay, here we go. And the last page, last 2 pages. Familiar territory, just like the opening, and just kind of creates this climax now to this passage. Poco a poco accelerando. So we're going to start kind of slow. We're going to take that molto ritardando that led us into this, and then one, two, 1, 2, 1, 2. Then we're back to our tempo 1 like a few bars later. Okay, so here we go. Transfer up and up. Nope. Sorry. I was just thinking about fingering as I was doing that. Make sure that's all making sense there. So 5. Hold that A down while you do those. Different voice, and your A can't just do, right? It's got to last beyond that downward stem C sharp and F sharp. So 5, connect these. And that's your thumb. Now octaves. Pedal as it gets louder. Five every time. Very percussive. Start soft and just kind of cut it there with a little bit of a breath mark, okay? So it goes up to G. It's just all white keys up to a G and then CBA at the end. It's got to be, kind of it's abrasive. And that's it. Senza pedale at the end, no pedal, and it just vanishes. All right, I hope that was helpful. Talk to you soon.